profiling. This includes how to examine and classify evidence, how to reconstruct a crime scene, and how to generate a profile. Topics to be covered include examination of evidence, classification of evidence, reconstruction, examining the offender's signature, generating a profile. Examination of evidence. Before a criminal profile can be created, the evidence must be obtained. Evidence, also known as inputs, will include crime scene evidence. This includes the physical evidence found at a crime scene as well as knowledge of details, for example, positioning of bodies. Forensic evidence. This includes the autopsy, toxicology reports, serology results and laboratory discoveries as well as any information about wounds, sexual acts, and the cause of death. The estimated time of death should also be included. Photographs. Photos should be taken at the crime scene and the surrounding area. Maps, both graphic and photographic, are also required. Police reports. A police report should include background information, police observations, information and demographics about the surrounding area, for example socioeconomic statistics, the political atmosphere, etc. Time and location of the incident. Details including weather, local events, etc. at the time the crime was committed. Police reports should not include any information about any suspects as this could make the criminal profiler's findings biased. Victim details. This includes any information about the victim, including their health, background, family details, age, etc. This should also include information on the victim's last known whereabouts. The examination process. The criminal profiler will then study all the evidence provided to them in order to create an accurate and full impression of the case. Any initial impressions that are psychological in nature, for example, if the suspect appeared to exhibit control, or any signs that may point to the psychological state of the offender, will help guide the classification of evidence. Classification of evidence. Classification of evidence is also known as the decision process models stage. This means that evidence and information are examined. Criminal profilers will look for patterns that may be meaningful. This is done using a 7-point process. 1. Crime type and style. Some crimes have classification systems, like homicide. Using evidence, the profiler will classify the homicide according to the following classes. Later, the characteristics of a single murder may indicate that a suspect has killed before and may be a serial killer. Homicide can be broken down into the following classes. Single homicide, 1 victim, 1 event. Double homicide, 2 victims, 1 event. Triple homicide, 3 victims, 1 event. Classic mass murder, 4+ victims, 1 event. This could be over a number of days. The suspect is usually a mentally disordered individual and the victims are unrelated. Family mass murder or suicide, 3+ victims, all related, plus suicide. Family mass murder, 3+ victims, all related. Spree murder, 3+ victims, 1 event at 2+ locations. Victims are random and there is no cooling off period between killings. Serial murder, 3+ victims, 3+ events. Serial murders are carefully planned. The victims are usually selected, and there is a cooling off period between killings. 2. Primary intent. This is the intent, or reason, behind the crime. A career crime may be committed due to criminal enterprise. A murder may be because of a robbery or a contract killing. Cause-specific crimes include personal feuds, gang reprisals, or political murders. Sexually motivated crimes are usually committed by lone offenders. Emotional crimes could be self-defense, euthanasia, or assassinations. Cult or organizational murders such as those performed by the Ku Klux Klan are also classified as emotional. A psychotic crime involved mental confusion or illness. For example, a mother killing her child whilst suffering from postnatal psychosis. 3. Offender risk. The profiler must then try to understand how much risk the offender was taking in order to commit the crime. This is done by figuring out the crime scene's location. Busy areas are naturally more high risk. The time the crime took place, combined with the crime scene's location, this could make a street that is deserted in the middle of the night low risk, very high risk if it is during the middle of the day. The amount of time it took to commit the crime. Crimes that take a long time are considered to be high risk. The amount of risk an offender takes can give profilers an idea about the state they are in as well as any potential motivations behind the crime. It can also give clues as to the characteristics of the offender such as maturity, excitement levels and sophistication. 4. Victim risk. The profiler must then figure out why the victim was targeted and whether their day-to-day activities put them at a high risk of becoming a victim. A profiler will look at the following: occupation, hobbies, lifestyle, friends and associates, age, psychical stature, habits, ability to defend themselves, location. This information is not intended to blame the victim in any way, it is merely to help profilers to understand the suspect. 5. Time factors. Profilers must then take into account how long it took to kill the victim, how long it took the suspect to commit additional acts before the death of the victim, how long it took the suspect to commit additional acts after the death of the victim, how long it took the suspect to dispose of the body. They will also take into account when this occurred, day or night, as timings can provide further information about the suspect's lifestyle or occupation. Time taken to commit each act may also provide clues about the psychological state of the suspect, as well as the motivation behind the crime. 6. Location. Criminal profilers need to study the location of the place of apprehension or arrest, the crime scene itself, the death scene, if it differs from the crime scene, and the place where the body was disposed of. This will give investigators information like about location the offender knows, whether vehicle was used during the crime and other related information. 7. Escalation. Profilers will analyze the sequence of acts that were committed while the crime was in progress. They can then make inferences about escalation. This means they can evaluate whether they believe the criminal will go on to perform the same, or worse, crimes. Reconstruction. A reconstruction of the crime is put together to determine how it may have taken place. The profiler can then work out why the crime happened and who may have committed it. The reconstruction is thought to be the most important element for the forensic team as they can use it as a corroborative agent. It is particularly useful for recounting conflicting witness accounts, because the reconstruction acts as an objective view which can show which scenario was more likely. Reconstructions can also help point out previously overlooked details and allow for a more in-depth analysis of the crime. Locard's exchange principle. Alphonse Bertillon was a 19th-century Parisian police clerk who introduced crime scene photography. Using his work, Dr. Edmond Locard developed Locard's exchange principle. This principle states that, when two items come into contact, there is an exchange. Basically, if a person touches an object, there will always be physical evidence left behind. This principle changed the face of forensics. It helps investigators link offenders with evidence, victims and locations. In crime scene reconstruction, it helps profilers create an accurate crime scene depiction. This means the reconstruction can be based off real evidence as opposed to supposition. Types, best practice and process of reconstruction. The three types of reconstruction are: physical evidence reconstruction. This involves using a physical element of the crime, for example, a weapon. Incident reconstruction. This involves reconstructing the crime itself, for example, murder. Event reconstruction. This involves reconstructing a specific sequence of the crime. To do a proper reconstruction, profilers must take into account the following. Physical evidence must be carefully examined and collected. Crime scenes must be carefully recorded and documented. Offender, victim and witness statements must be viewed with suspicion. The analysis must be performed in a frame-by-frame way. Circumstances surrounding the crime must also be analyzed and explained. Physical evidence must be relied upon more so than witness testimonies. Patterns within a scene must be identified. A logical system must be used to induct and deduct. Limitations. Reconstruction may be a useful tool, but it does have its limitations. The main limitation is accuracy relating to movement and people's behavior. While it may be possible to deduce the whereabouts of an individual relating to the crime, the way they moved from location to location, and how they interacted during the crime is impossible to know. Things like facial expressions and body language leave no physical evidence. Evidence dynamics. Another limitation of reconstruction is evidence dynamics. Evidence goes through many processes while being collected. It is recognized, identified, collected, and documented before being compared and individuated. Evidence is then used for the reconstruction process. At this point, physical evidence has gone through so many processes that it may have been altered. Alterations of this kind are known as evidence dynamics. Evidence dynamics include the offender's actions. Precautionary is when the suspect tampers with physical evidence before, during, or after the crime to confuse the police and CSIs. Fantasy or ritual is when the suspect arranges the crime scene for some other reason, like engaging the body in post-mortem activity. Staging is when the suspect tampers with evidence to deflect suspicion away from themselves. Actions of the victim. A victim's actions before a crime can be taken as evidence in error. If a victim survives, they could clean themselves or the crime scene, which could affect the evidence. Self-protection could also result in tampering. Actions of the witness. Witnesses have occasionally stolen items from the victims. Other witnesses may do something to protect the witness's dignity, which can result in tampered evidence. Secondary transfer. This is when two items or people come into contact after the crime and accidentally exchange evidence. Fire. Fires can be intentionally used to destroy evidence. Methods used to put out the fire will also damage evidence. Weather. Weather like rain can affect the evidence. Decomposition. Time, as well as insect and animal activity, can affect a crime scene. Law enforcement. Medical staff, police, coroners and forensic scientists each work in a different capacity and may accidentally compromise evidence. For example, a nurse may be involved in a life-saving activity that could move or destroy evidence. Examining the offender's signature. A signature related to the offender's specific behaviors which aren't necessarily related to the crime or how it was committed. These behaviors are thought to meet the suspect's emotional and physiological needs and are known as signature behaviors. Criminal profilers analyze and interpret signature behaviors to gain an understanding of a suspect's motives and to help link cases. It is particularly useful for linking cases because behaviors are thought to change less over time compared to methods used to commit the crime, aka modus operandi, or MO. Signature behaviors can include how the body is displayed. Does the suspect with to induce shock or disgust? Specific types of sexual activity. Torture. Types of binding, bondage or ligature used. Brutality. Control or domination. Abusive language. Specific injuries or types of mutilation, especially when committed in a precise order. Identifying the signature. Signature behaviors can be difficult to spot, even by the most experienced profilers. This is because many variables can affect behavior at each crime scene. When a signature cannot be identified, over-reliance on the modus operandi can cause something known as linkage blindnesses. This is when a pattern that links crimes together is not noticed. Generating a profile. The last step of profiling is generating the profile itself. This includes a description of the type of person who may have committed the crime. It also includes information about how an individual may respond to different investigative measures. This makes it possible for investigators to draw up an effective strategy then. The profile should include information on background and demographics, physical characteristics, habits, beliefs and values, pre-crime and post-crime behaviors, any recommendations the profiler has for the investigation, interrogation and interview. Final actions. Once the profile is drawn up, it is checked against existing evidence, the crime itself and the key decision process models. Any recommendations must match the expected response of the offender. When a criminal profile is deemed congruent, a written report is completed and sent to the relevant investigative agencies. This can